Welcome to College Smart Radio, helping you understand the true cost of college and tackle the runaway costs of financing a college education. College Smart Radio is hosted by Beatrice Schultz, a certified financial planner and founder of West Face College Planning. Now, here's your host for College Smart Radio, Beatrice Schultz.
For Americans looking to save money on college, studying abroad may be the answer. Most universities throughout the world do not charge high tuition, and some charge nothing, even for international students. My guest on today's College Smart Radio program has 2 degrees from foreign universities, and she didn't pay a dime in tuition for either. Hi, I'm Beatrice Schultz. Welcome to our weekly show, College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of a college education. Our show is about bringing up-to-date and practical advice to parents who are dealing with the cost of a college education for their kids. With some private schools costing well over $60,000 a year, a UC costing $35,000 a year, and a California State University running $25,000 a year, parents need more help than ever. We bring you that help by sharing ways to pay less, tapping into financial aid, and prioritizing your source of funds to make sure you get through the most expensive years of your life. Based on my own education and experience, I share my insights with you week in and week out. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of the San Carlos-based college planning business, West Face College Planning. I host workshops and webinars on college planning and consult with parents on a daily basis. In addition to my insights, I bring in experts in many areas of the college process, from counselors, financial professionals, financial aid officers, student coaches, parents, and even students. You'll learn firsthand the ins and outs of how to pay for college and survive financially. In addition to our show, you can find lots of powerful information at our website, collegesmartradio.com. We have many articles that I've authored with up-to-date information on navigating the waters of paying for the runaway cost of college. We also have a monthly e-newsletter full of content about college planning, and we have a link to our free community parent workshops and webinars that I host to teach parents about how to pay for college and how the financial aid system really works. So let's get into today's show. Imagine this, a university degree program where you can study whatever you want alongside diverse and dynamic students and professors, complete with a study abroad element, the opportunity to travel, competitiveness on the global marketplace, as well as a foreign language element that all but guarantees fluency upon graduation. Now imagine that this degree program was tuition-free. My guest on today's show is Holly Oberle. She's going to share with us how she made this happen for her and how you can also make it happen. Holly's a writer and the author of the book College Abroad. Holly's joining us from Berlin, where she's currently a PhD candidate at the Berlin Graduate School for Transitional Studies, the Freie Universität Berlin. Hi, Holly. Welcome to College Smart Radio.
Thanks for having me, Beatrice. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us. So let's start by sharing with your audience your story and how you ended up where you are in Germany.
Sure. Well, I was a bachelor student at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois, and at that time I had an opportunity to study abroad in Germany, but I was really concerned about my student debt. Knox College is a great school, but it was also an expensive private school. And so I decided not to do that, and that kind of haunted me for after I graduated. And I always sort of thought to myself, what would have happened if I had gone to Germany? And so I was sitting in my office one day. I worked at a law firm after I graduated, and I just was thinking about it again. And just on a whim, I just decided to start Googling master's programs in Germany. And I quickly found out that German schools are very international. They invite students from all over the world, and not only that, but they generally don't charge tuition. And that made me very happy because I had a big student debt from Knox and was trying my best to not add to that debt. And so I just started doing a lot more research and spent about the next year really saving so that I could afford just the cost of living over there. And then I did my applications. I was successful, and I moved to Bremen, Germany, where I studied international relations at Jacobs University. And then that was a 2-year program. And after that, I was just so in love with living abroad and also, saving money on college, of course, that I applied to a PhD program in Berlin, got in. And not only was that program tuition free, but they also gave me a small stipend, living stipend, to help me pay my living costs. And so then I moved to Berlin, and I've been in Berlin ever since.
Wonderful. Now, did you speak German before you went? Is that why you chose Germany as your country abroad?
I wouldn't say I spoke it very well, but I had taken several German classes, and that's one of the things that has been really nice about studying in Germany is that although my programs have been English-speaking programs because they were very international programs, just being in Germany, I've become fluent, and that was never going to happen just taking those German classes at high school and college. So yeah, I did speak a little bit of German, but it wasn't very good.
Oh, that's great. And so the master's program that you enrolled in was mostly or all in you could take all English language courses to get the master's degree?
Yes, the school, the Jacobs University, is a private international university, and it's a fairly new university. It's a little experimental in Germany, but its goal is to basically attract students from all over the world. And so everything at that university is in English. Even, the administrative stuff is done in English. Now, that's a little bit different from my PhD program, which is in English. All the courses are done in English, but it's run through a public German state institution. And so all of the administrative stuff is done in German, which if you didn't speak German and you were to come, and actually there are several PhD students, colleagues of mine that don't speak German, you can get around it. It's not that difficult. Most Germans speak enough English, but yeah, even my courses at the PhD level are also in English.
So you've piqued our audience, I'm sure. They're like, well, how can I get a bit of this? So, and you wrote a book about it because you did a lot of research and you learned so much, and you can share, and a link to that book will be available on my website, collegesmartradio.com. But tell me, Holly, how did you, you kind of said you did a year of research. So for our listeners, what are the steps? How do you even figure it out?
Well, that's a good question. I think if you're interested in this, in doing this, you, first of all, you have to maybe pick up my book, which would be a great thing, but also start to understand how other countries finance their education because, Germany basically has no tuition fees. That's pretty similar throughout Europe. However, there are some European countries that will charge tuition fees to non-EU citizens. So obviously that would mean that an American coming over would be charged tuition. The same with the UK. So if you're really looking to save money, you sort of have to narrow your choices down to a few regions or a few countries that really don't have tuition or have relatively low tuition. So that would be my first point of advice. Of course, the other thing is, if you have any kind of interest in a foreign language, then that also helps you to sort of narrow it down. And once you sort of have, some countries or a region or maybe even a couple universities that you're really interested in, then the next step is really, the internet is such a great thing. There isn't I found out very quickly, there isn't a big guide for universities all over the world. So you really kind of have to first narrow it down and then get on the internet and just start doing a lot of research. And from there, the application process, at least for me, was very similar to the application process to an American university. And because I applied to an international school, I could even do everything in English. If you're applying to a school that's not in English, if you happen to already be fluent in Spanish or French or something and you're going to go abroad that way, then you might need to certify your documents and get them translated. But it's really, I found out, I had a lot of anxiety going into it and thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But it was actually relatively simple. You got to put in a little bit more time, obviously, than you would, for an American university because you might need to get things translated. You might have to mail things abroad, your application documents and things like that. You might have to, mail a copy or scan a copy of your passport. If you don't have a passport, then you have to go get a passport. But generally, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, it was the process took a couple of extra steps because it was abroad, but it was nothing that people who are applying to American universities can't handle.
One of the questions I had is kind of, and I'm sure some of our listeners do, what's the difference between studying abroad program or going abroad for your entire degree?
Sure. That's a great question. So the study abroad is a very popular thing to do as a bachelor student in the United States. But as I found out when I was considering doing it myself, and also when I was doing research for my book, is that most study abroad programs that are offered through American universities only last an average of 8 weeks. And so obviously the biggest difference between doing a study abroad program and doing your university entirely abroad is just the time. You'll be doing, if you're going abroad as a bachelor's student, you'll be spending at least 3 years. Most bachelor's programs in Europe, for example, are 3 years instead of 4, which is another great way to save money because you don't have 4 years of living expenses to try to come up with. You only have 3. But it's still, 3 years is a long time. I think a lot of people who go and do study abroad programs, they want to do it because they want to gain some kind of, they want to gain language skills or cultural competence. They want to really understand the culture of the country they're going to. And take it from somebody who knows, because I've been in Germany. I also lived in Hungary for a while. I did a fellowship in Israel. I've lived in a couple different countries by now. 8 weeks is not enough to understand a country, and it is not enough to learn a language either. So while I think that study abroad programs are great, I don't really think that, especially those really short-term ones, 8 weeks, even a semester, is really not long enough to accomplish the goals that a lot of students want to get out of those programs.
If you've just joined us, my guest on today's show is Holly Oberle, the writer and author of the book College Abroad. You're with us on College Smart Radio. We'll be right back after a quick break.
For more information on today's topic, visit collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. College Smart Radio continues in moments on AM 1220 KDOW. Contact Beatrice Schultz at collegesmartradio.com or call 650-587-1559. Now back to College Smart Radio with your host Beatrice Schultz on AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of college. I'm Beatrice Schultz. We all know that college is expensive and will most likely be some of the most costly years for a family. Understanding how to navigate the college costs is a smart thing to know. To help families be on this radio show, I host community workshops live and via webinar several times a month that explain the costs of various colleges, how the financial aid system works, and things to consider to prepare yourself for this tremendous expense. To learn more and reserve your seat, go to my website, collegesmartradio.com. If you've just joined us, I've been talking with my guest, Holly Oberle, who's a writer and author of the book College Abroad. We were just talking about the differences between study abroad programs and going abroad for your entire degree. And one of the things we talked about during the break is the other real difference between just taking a study abroad program is when you go to a study abroad program and you're part of a college, you pay the full tuition and fees for that college. So if you're going to a private college that has tuition of $40,000 and you leave for a term, you're going to still pay that half a tuition. So that's also a good reason to think you don't save money by studying abroad as part of a college program, but if you go abroad for your entire degree, you definitely can. So when you are, Hollywood, as part of your program, do you run into people that are doing study abroad programs or not so much? Or the colleges you're at haven't been ones that have study abroad programs, or have you met them in the streets?
Sure. Actually, yeah. I mean, Berlin is a fairly popular place to study abroad, and as a PhD student, I also have to do some teachings of undergrad students, and because I teach in English, so that attracts a lot of American study abroad students. My classes do. So just through through that capacity, I've actually met a lot of American study abroad students from, University of Arizona, University of Maryland, all kinds of places.
That's wonderful. So what are the other advantages of going abroad for college besides saving money?
Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, you really get to, you live in a country for 3 years as a bachelor's student, maybe for 2 years as a master's student. I mean, you really just get a much better opportunity to understand the culture and to learn the language and to see how holidays are celebrated in those countries, and you make local friends. I just think that as a study abroad student or as somebody who's just traveling through, you really don't get those kinds of opportunities. And so not only are you getting an education, you're getting your degree in whatever it is, mathematics or political science or whatever, you're also getting a really intense cultural experience and a cultural education and a language education. And, that's, I think, going to be that's so valuable, especially when you think about getting a job in the globalized marketplace. You can say, look, I've lived abroad. I'm a very independent thinker. I speak a language. I'm well-traveled. I'm culturally competent. I think those are things that a lot of companies look for. So I think it gives you that edge as well.
So what are the disadvantages or some of the downsides that you think of about going abroad for college?
Well, obviously the distance. I mean, it can be very tough. I mean, especially I think of myself as a bachelor's student going from Colorado to Illinois, and that seems like a very long ways away from my parents. And I was homesick, and this is another degree of that, obviously. And you combine that with a little bit of culture shock, and it can get a little bit lonely at times. And of course, you can't just fly home if you're feeling particularly lonely one weekend, like you might be able to do if you were in the States. So you really have to be a little bit more dedicated, really feel like, okay, this is something I'm going to throw myself into. But technology has made it fairly easy to stay in touch. Facebook helps you stay in touch with your friends back home. You can Skype. So I found that it's not quite as difficult as I thought it would be, but certainly there are times when I'm like, oh man, I wish it was only a 2-hour flight back to see my parents rather than an 8-hour flight.
Yeah, and the expense of that also, especially if you're a student.
Yeah.
Even if, as you say, you make a stipend, I'm sure that doesn't cover a trip home very often, mostly living. So,
no.
And how about that and you may be talking to friends who have already come back with the degrees. If you do want to come back to the North American market, do you feel pretty strongly that it's an advantage to have an international degree? Is there a question about accreditation or translation of a foreign degree if you have it on your resume?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had to deal with that directly yet myself, but I did talk to several, students in the course of writing my book, and it really isn't much of a problem. There are tons of students that or workers that come to the U.S. Every year who got their degrees in their home country and have relatively little trouble getting a job in the U.S. If they're qualified and if they want the job. And so, yeah, I think for a few careers, it might be a disadvantage. Like I could think of law, for example. Law would be one of those things where you wouldn't want to go abroad because you need to pass the bar, in the United States. And so that's one of those things. And also there are maybe a few specialized medical degrees that you wouldn't want to necessarily go abroad for. But I think especially at the undergrad level, when it's a little bit more general, political science, or humanities or literature, those are things that, are having the U.S. degree doesn't, I think, necessarily matter too much. And you might get one or two employers who might not think that your degree abroad is as good as an American degree. But I'm going to think that they're going to value your cultural competence and your language skills and your independence more than where the degree came from.
How about that when I think about bachelor degrees and the disadvantage of being younger and going overseas? So, there aren't that many 18-year-olds who feel confident, like you said, to feel like they want to be so far away from home. But when you're searching for bachelor degrees in Europe, it's still the same model where you can find, like in Germany, there are colleges where you can get your bachelor's degree and not have to pay international foreign student tuition?
Absolutely. In Germany, it's actually a law that you can't charge students different levels of tuition just because of where they come from. It's considered discriminatory. So that's Germany. That's not the same in every European country, I have to say. But even in countries that do charge, in Europe, that do charge international students tuition, I think most Americans would be really surprised at how low those tuition charges are. I mean, we're talking about maybe 500 euros, which is around $700 a semester. Maybe as much as I've seen some schools that charge $2,000 a semester, and that's considered a lot by the local students. But that's nothing for us.
Yeah. So how do you pay for it? How are students paying for it? Is it money from home? Is there any way as a non-EU citizen that you can work or earn any kind of money when you're in Germany?
That's a very good question. So the first thing I would say is that there are schools abroad that have relationships with the United States government to the point where you can take out loans to pay for the tuition if there is any tuition, as well as your living expenses. So there aren't a ton of those schools, but there are a few. So if you search the FAFSA website, for example, you can find some of those schools. If your school doesn't qualify, then, for example, Bremen is where I went to school, the cost of living is very, very low. And so my suggestion would be to find a school that's in a smaller town, not in like a place like Paris or London or some of these popular, European destinations, and smaller cities where the cost of living is pretty low. And, I paid for it all myself by just really skimping and scraping and saving for about a year to a year and a half, and that lasted me for 2 years in my master's. So if you just budget, and maybe if your parents have been saving for a little bit, you can ask them for that money to cover your living expenses. It's not that hard.
Yeah, well, it's less expensive than for most local colleges. So we've got just a couple more minutes. Do you have a favorite experience you want to share with our audience that'll say, oh, I want to buy her book and I want to try and see if this experience would work for me?
Sure. Well, I would say that my favorite experience about living abroad has just been the opportunity to just really travel a lot all over Europe. Being in Germany, it's not that far to go to Ireland or to go to Paris or Barcelona or wherever. And that's another great thing about being abroad and staying abroad for a long period of time rather than doing your study abroad. You can do it very cheaply too. I mean, trust me, I did it on a very, very low budget if you're willing to kind of cut some corners. I've traveled all over Europe. I've traveled all over North Africa, all over the Middle East, and I never, ever, 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 as a young student, thought I would ever see any of these places that I've seen. And so that's just another great thing, and it's another thing that I think is a resume builder. It's something, and it's just a great life experience. It's a great memory that you can have.
Well, Holly, thank you so much for joining us today on College Smart Radio.
All right. Thank you so much.
A link to Holly's book, which is for sale on Amazon.com, will be available on our website. And thanks so much for all your enthusiasm. Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. We hope you picked up some new information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here on KDOW, 1220 AM, Saturdays at 3 p.m. We promise to bring you up-to-date information from the front lines of helping parents deal with the most expensive years of their lives. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
You've been listening to College Smart Radio with certified financial planner Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. And join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.